Week number 10 of the NFL season is officially in the books, so in today's video, let's go through every single game of week number 10 and give my full reactions to each game. If you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, but let's hop into it. And we are going to begin with our Thursday night football matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, as predicted, I did think this was going to be a very high scoring affair, and it was exactly that. The Ravens would win the game 35-34, and I felt like we learned about a lot with both these teams. For starters, despite the Cincinnati Bengals record, these are two of the best offenses in the entire NFL. Joe Burrow is putting up ridiculous stats, playing like an MVP, but it's just unfortunately not leading to wins. And the same thing can be said about Lamar Jackson, except that he is actually winning games. Both these quarterbacks had great games in this performance. I think both of these quarterbacks are playing like top 5 quarterbacks, and I think the offenses for these teams are really what's keeping both these teams afloat. The only downside about this game is that both these defenses don't look very good, and when the Ravens don't have Kyle Hamilton, they are a complete disaster defensively. Jamar Chase in 2 games has just been a monster against this Ravens defense, and for a Ravens defense that was kind of the identity of the football team last year, it's the polar opposite where the offense is the complete identity of this Ravens team, and the defense is nowhere to be found of from where they were last year. With that all said though, this Ravens offense is just extremely good. In this game, they found themselves in a deficit early, but because of some turnovers on Cincinnati's end that would ultimately bite them in the ass, Baltimore was able to put up enough points and was able to do enough offensively in the second half to win the game. Then we had our Germany game between the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. Now, I actually did predict the Carolina Panthers to win this game, and I actually ended up being correct somehow. For Bryce Young, from what I saw in this game, I thought he played okay. There's definitely some moments of inexperience and somebody who was still kind of figuring things out, but I felt like he definitely took some steps forward, even if the stat sheet doesn't necessarily represent how he actually played. This was just a game where, honestly, Bryce Young wasn't really needed to do a whole bunch because of how effective the run game was the entire game. When you can hand it off to your running back 28 times and get 153 yards and an extra touchdown, then I think you're going to continue to do that the entire game. It wasn't really a quarterback-centric focus in this offensive scheme. It was really just hand the ball off, run the ball, and let Chuba Hubbard cook, and he did exactly that. This is now back-to-back wins for Bryce Young and this Panthers team, so they're definitely starting to build a little bit of momentum, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Their wins are against the Giants, who are 2-8, and the New Orleans Saints, who have only like 3 wins on the season. Now, for the New York Giants, I think the Daniel Jones experiment is completely over with at this point. It was already over with a few weeks ago, but maybe you wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but you're now 2-8. Daniel Jones had 2 interceptions in this game, and he was playing one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and he made that defense actually look good. So the $40 million a year that they're paying Daniel Jones is obviously a terrible contract, and I think they're going to be looking for a new quarterback come probably next summer. Then we had maybe the biggest upset of the day. Maybe I'm missing an upset, but this is definitely one of the biggest upsets of the day. The Chicago Bears lose to the New England Patriots. Now, I have a lot of things to say about the Chicago side, but real quick, I'll just briefly talk about the Patriots side of things. For the Patriots, this was maybe their best win of the season. I think they had a couple good wins, but this one is maybe their most dominant performance that I've seen from this team. Drake May, outside of that interception, was pretty darn good the entire day, making some big time throws, playing within the system and not doing too much like he did maybe a couple weeks ago. They also got the ground game going a tad bit in this one, but I'm really just impressed with how the defense played. This is not a good Bears offense, but you held this Bears offense to 3 points, and I think that's a big compliment to the defense. They did a hell of a job in this performance. This is a massive win for the team to continue to build their charisma, continue to grow their team. And yeah, it was a good win. For Chicago, though, this was a horrendous loss. Your offense only managed to put up 3 points, and when you look at their yardage for the day, it is completely just embarrassing. They put up a total of around 140 yards on the day, with Caleb Williams managing to get only 120 yards. Fortunately, there was not a bunch of turnovers for the team, but there was a bunch of sacks. I mean, this was as pathetic of a performance I've seen from an offense in quite some time, maybe outside of the Dallas Cowboys this week, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. When it comes down to an offense that is as talented as this Bears team is, it is very disappointing to see them have this type of performance against a defense that is just not as good as maybe what they showed out there today. This is a Patriots defense that gives up like 20 plus points a game pretty consistently, and this Bears team managed just 3 points. I'm not saying you bench Caleb Williams. I'm not saying you give up on him because he's a first overall pick for a reason. You're only 9 weeks into his career, but this is definitely not a good sign of a developing quarterback. I definitely think this is a bigger issue within the coaching staff than it is with the players, but yeah, there's a lot of things that I am concerned about with this Bears team and that I'm concerned with Caleb Williams. Then we have the San Francisco 49ers, who narrowly beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I felt like the offense for San Francisco was really good the entire day. There was a couple just miscues that would go on to happen that allowed Tampa Bay to stick into this game. The biggest miscue of them all was obviously that muffed punt that would give Baker Mayfield and that offense some really good field. However, on the day, statistically speaking, the San Francisco 49ers were basically outclassing Tampa Bay the entire night. It was just, again, those miscues and not effectively putting the ball in the end zone, which just kind of hurt them. And not to mention, they missed like, I think, 3 field goals on the day. Brock Purdy had a really nice day. Christian McCaffrey wasn't effective in the run game this game, but I just think his presence alone allowed this offense to open up so much more. I think as long as you have Christian McCaffrey in the backfield and as long as he's going about 75%, this offense is clearly better. I still have a couple concerns about what this team is going to look like moving forward, but this was definitely a nice step in the right direction. And then for Tampa Bay side of things, listen, you just got to get healthy. This team just does not have the weapons on the outside to really manage to match up with a lot of these teams. They're relying so heavily on their running backs. Their leading receiver today was Rachaad White with 6 catches for 39 yards. Mike Evans, please come back. I'm begging you. Moving on to the Chiefs versus the Denver Broncos. I'm going to start off with Denver side of things here because I think that's pretty interesting, all things considered. I thought Bo Nix had himself a really nice day. I mean, you're going up against one of the best defenses in the NFL. That Chiefs defense is awesome. It's full of stars. And despite that, Bo Nix was 22 for 30 for 215 and 2 touchdowns. Was it a perfect day for Bo Nix? No, absolutely not. I mean, he's not somebody who's going to push the ball down the field a whole bunch, but when he was doing it, I thought he was fairly effective with it. Courtland Sutton had a very nice day, 6 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. He's had a pretty underrated season, all things considered. Unfortunately for this team, they just don't have the talent to really match up with opposing teams, such as a team like Kansas City. Despite that, though, they're 5-5, and I think Bo Nix is a massive reason why. Heck, you're 1 field goal away from beating the 9-0 Kansas City Chiefs, so I think you have to just take that and go with it. For Kansas City, this is probably their worst performance of the season. The offense wasn't terribly efficient. I thought they had some good moments. They didn't have much of a run game, and their leading receiver was actually Kareem Hunt on the day. I thought Mahomes looked good. He didn't turn the ball over. He made the right plays at the right time. They just couldn't execute at the highest level that we know this team can typically do. But they found a way to win the game off of a blocked field goal. It's definitely, just sort of a Chiefs thing to do where it's like they continue to downplay against a team they probably shouldn't be in games with, and then they get into situations where they have to make a play, and they typically do it. It just so happens that sometimes it can look a little lucky. And then we have the Buffalo Bills versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this was a good old-fashioned butt-whooping from the Buffalo Bills. It wasn't like that from the get-go. At the beginning of the game, it was actually a pretty close one with some turnovers, but by the end of the game, it was like 30-13. So yeah, it was kind of a good old butt-whooping at the end, but Buffalo did their job here. Josh Allen did have 2 turnovers, but when they needed to make plays, they made some plays. The offense got going when they needed it to. Josh Allen, again, didn't have his best day, but he did enough good things to get this team going. Shout out to James Cook, 19 carries for 80 yards and 1 touchdown, and Matt Collins had himself a very nice day as well. This is a Bills team that is quietly 8-2 and has an argument to be made that they're one of the best teams in the entire league at this point. And then there's the Indianapolis side of things. I don't know why Joe Flacco's starting. It just doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to me. If he's going to go up there and throw 3 interceptions, why not just go out there and have Anthony Richardson do the exact same thing? Anthony is a developmental quarterback, and sure, you want to punish him for taking himself out of the game. I understand that. I totally understand it, but come on, guys. This is getting ridiculous. Putting 40-year-old Joe Flacco out there instead of 21-year-old Anthony Richardson, who is the future of your franchise, just makes no sense to me. Sure, you don't want to put Anthony out there against the Wolves versus a really good Bills team, but how is he going to develop? How is he going to learn? I get it. He's developing through practice and learning on the sideline, but put him out there. He needs game reps. I don't understand why they're doing this, and I don't know why they haven't came out and made him the starter immediately after the game, because Joe Flacco with 3 interceptions and many other bad plays just doesn't make much sense to start him at this point. It also does suck because it feels like you're wasting good games from guys like Jonathan Taylor and Alec Pierce and even Michael Pittman. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Even if Anthony is throwing turnovers and having bad moments, let him learn through it. I just think it's bad. Moving on, we had one of the best games of the day between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Washington Commanders. Now, Pittsburgh did come out on top in this one, but Washington definitely had some chances to ultimately win this game. This kind of feels like 2 teams that are really close to each other. Like, in terms of a power ranking, I'd probably probably put these teams like really close to one another because these two teams just feel really evenly matched. Like if these two teams were to play 10 times, I think both teams would find a way to win 5 each. Like this is a really good matchup of two teams that have kind of interesting styles of play. I've been really impressed with this Steelers team these past couple weeks. I know that their first couple wins with Russell Wilson were against two bad teams, but this is a really good Washington team, and they went out there and they handled their business. They played a good game. It wasn't a clean game from Pittsburgh by no means, but it was an evenly spread out game. They were good from start to finish, and even though there were some highs and some lows, they still managed to put the game away in the end of the fourth quarter. On the day, Russell Wilson was 14 for 28 for 195 yards, 3 touchdowns, but did have 1 interception. And even though the run game wasn't necessarily efficient today, they definitely did want to run the ball as much as they could. Najee Harris had 21 carries, Jalen Ward had 14 carries. Neither guy was terribly efficient with their runs, but they were effective when they needed to. For the Washington Commanders side of things, this is an ugly loss. I think that most times they'd like to win these type of games. This is a good team that you lost to, but there really isn't any harm in this loss. You're still a developing team that needs to build a culture and needs to build an identity. Jaden Daniels currently is a young quarterback. You're still kind of figuring things out, and despite that, you're 7-3 and have, I think, first place in your division, or at least second place, one of the two. I still think this Commanders team is easily a top 10 team, easily a playoff contender, but I think this game potentially could maybe slow down a little bit of the championship hype that I've been seeing from some people on this Commanders team. I still think they're a good team, just not a Super Bowl contender quite yet. This game kind of showed why. And then we have maybe the ugliest game of football that I have seen in maybe a couple weeks, to be honest with you, between the Minnesota Vikings and the Jacksonville Jaguars. 5 interceptions on the day, a bunch of missed opportunities, and it's kind of been a repeating pattern here with Sam Darnold and this Vikings team. This Vikings defense is awesome. This team in general is really good. They can move the ball down the field effectively, but for whatever reason, there's just 1 or 2 plays every single game where Sam Darnold just makes a really bad mistake. At least that has kind of felt like the theme the past couple weeks. In this game, he had 3 interceptions, and I think either all of them or most of them were in the red zone, which is terribly just unfortunate and really just bad. Some of the turnovers weren't just, unlucky plays. They were just bad throws that should have never been thrown in the first place, or they were just missed throws. I'm not panicking on Sam Darnold yet because I feel like we've seen a lot of really good things from him. It's just cleaning up the turnovers, which have to be handled immediately if this Vikings team wants to go where they want to go. At least in this game, you're going up against a almost incompetently put together Jaguars team right now. Like Jacksonville starting Mac Jones, who is just god awful. And yeah, Jacksonville, I don't have much to say about you. It's just one of those seasons. I still think Minnesota is a good team. They're 7-2 for a reason, but I'm becoming a little bit more pessimistic about this team. I want to see Sam Darnold go out there and have a really clean game against a bad or good team. I just want to see him play clean with no turnovers and effectively move the ball down the field and score touchdowns in the red zone instead of throwing it to the other team. And then we have the Atlanta Falcons versus the New Orleans Saints. One of the bigger upsets of the week. New Orleans felt like they were coming into this game with no real reason to even try to win this one. You have a new head coach. You got a bunch of guys who are probably off the team next year. Yet despite that, they actually kind of felt like they were playing with a lot of heart and a lot of motivation for some reason. I don't really know what the motivation was. Maybe they really liked their interim head coach, but it felt like they actually were trying compared to the past couple weeks where it doesn't feel like they were actually trying. I'll start off with Atlanta and then focus on New Orleans by the end of it. For Atlanta, this is just a bad loss. You're going up against an interim head coach, a team that has really no reason to even be in this game. You were in first place in the division. You're still going to be in first place, but you would have liked to ideally grow that lead in your division while also putting yourself in a more higher standing within the power rankings. This was a bad performance from Kirk Cousins, even though he was 23 for 38 for 300 yards. He also did have an interception. To me, it was just a game of missed opportunities and just really just failing to execute at a high level. Multiple missed field goals, multiple missed opportunities. Bijan had a good game though, so that's cool. I'm not overreacting to this one though. If Younghoe Koo makes those field goals, it's a totally different ball game, but he didn't, and this was the result. Back to New Orleans, I don't know where this came from you guys. I don't know where this team has been the past 7 weeks, but this looked like a team that could actually be competitive with a lot of other rosters. I feel like they have the talent on the field, and hell, I even feel like they could have played even better in this game, but I don't think the New Orleans Saints are a good team all of a sudden. I still think they're one of the worst teams in the league, but if they keep playing like this, they'll find a way to win a couple more games down the road. Moving on to the Chargers versus the Tennessee Tennessee Titans, I'm just going to be really quick on this one because I feel like we all kind of know what happened here. Tennessee, they have a good enough defense to hold opposing offenses to like less than 30 points, but they're just not a good unit overall. They don't create much turnovers, and they're kind of hit and miss with their protection. And offensively speaking, Will Levis had himself a good game, but he's just not good enough to go up against good teams like the LA Chargers. He's just okay. The LA Chargers, it was a dominant performance from start to finish. Justin Herbert was 14 for 18, 164 yards and 1 touchdown. They dropped 27 points. They were bullying the Titans the entire game. I mean, it was just a really solid performance where they were controlling the ball, not turning the ball over, making the proper plays when they needed to, and honestly just handling business versus a really bad team. I want to see the Chargers do this against a good team, but as of right now, we haven't seen that. Fortunately, we will see that in the upcoming weeks because they have a couple more tough matchups ahead, but this was a good step in the right direction for the LA Chargers in terms of just dominating teams. But I want to see this team do this against a team like Cincinnati or Baltimore or somebody like that, which we will see hopefully in the next couple weeks. And then we have the Arizona Cardinals blowing out the New York Jets. Now, I, for whatever reason, picked the Jets to win this one. I don't know why. It was a terrible decision on that day, but Arizona just dominated from start to finish. I feel like every single time the Arizona Cardinals win a game, I just start to have to give myself a little bit more of a push to put this team in my top 10 because they find ways to win games. And when you're dominating a Jets team that has talent 31-6, and they weren't just dominating, they were just straight up bullying them offensively. I feel like this low-key could be a top 10 team, which is just crazy to say. I want to give extra credit to everyone from the coaching staff to the ownership to the roster to Kyler to Trey Benson to James Conner. Every single one of those guys needs a ton of credit because to go from one of the worst teams in the NFL last year with a ton of injuries to now being in first place in your division and dominating the New York Jets, who have Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson, and you beat them 31-6, has just got to be an awesome feeling if you are a Cardinals fan. I mean, Kyler Murray was awesome today. 22 of 24, 266 and a touchdown, and he also added some stuff with his legs. He put on a clinic, and the New York Jets looked abysmal in this one. I mean, this is just, from start to finish, they were getting their asses kicked. I don't even know what to say about this Jets team. I thought they were starting to build towards the right direction, but their season's over with, and man, this is a bad look for this franchise, and I don't know what their future looks like moving forward. Maybe I'll have to go into more detail about them in a separate video, but this was ugly. Speaking of ugly, 34-6, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia. Man, well, for Philadelphia, this was exactly what you wanted to see. I would have preferred to see them have a more clean start in the finish because Jalen Hurts did have a red zone interception, which wasn't really his fault. It was just an awesome play by Trevon Diggs. And outside of that, I felt like they were just okay in the first half, but then they kind of put the beat down on in the third quarter. And by the end of it, Dallas was out for the count. I don't got much to add for Philadelphia. They were supposed to do this, and they did exactly their job. I would have liked to have seen Saquon be a bit more of a part of their game plan in this one, but I'm just sort of nitpicking. For Dallas, I mean, this is just getting uglier and uglier every single week. Cooper Rush on the day, 13 for 23 for 45 yards. That is just, that's just bad. And it wasn't like Dallas was, out for the count early on. At halftime, the score was only 14-6. They actually had an opportunity to score a touchdown, but the lights were blinding CeeDee Lamb, which is hysterical. But yeah, I mean, this season's over with for Dallas. If it's me, I'm probably telling everyone like Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, Deron Bland, DeMarcus Lawrence, like just take the rest of the season off. We're going to tank for a top 10, top 5 pick. Mike McCarthy, you're gone next year. We're going to bring in a whole new coaching staff. And hopefully Jared Jones makes the move in the free agency because, yeah, this Cowboys team sucks. One last little note about the Dallas Cowboys. This is kind of a question to you guys. I feel like this is maybe the worst Cowboys team that I've seen in my lifetime. I was born in 2002. I didn't get to see those 2004 teams, but I mean, I think this Cowboys team honestly is probably worse than 2015 or 2020 and even years beyond that. I mean, this is just a god-awful Cowboys team that can't even compete with these rosters. And to end the video off, we have the Detroit Lions and the Houston Texans. Now, unfortunately, I cannot talk about the Monday Night Football game because I'm recording this at 11 o'clock on Sunday. So if you guys want to see my reaction to the Monday Night Football game, I will have a post on the community tab. So make sure you guys check that out if you are interested in that. But getting back to it, the Detroit Lions come from behind to beat the Houston Texans. And I got a lot of things to say about this one. For starters, the Detroit Lions won a game against a really good Texans team in the same game where Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions. RIP to Jared Goff and his MVP hopes because throwing 5 picks and still finding a way to win isn't a very good look for your MVP case, but regardless, hey, a win is a win. Who cares about MVP? As long as you keep winning, who cares? For the Detroit Lions side of things, that first half was pretty darn ugly, but you were able to put something together in that second half, and man, it's got to feel good to be a Lions fan to know that you can have an abysmal game against a good team and still find a way to win. The defense made enough plays in the second half to make things happen, whether it was creating turnovers or getting some stops and just executing at a high level. They were able to do so the entire second half. And offensively speaking, outside of the 5 picks, I thought Jared Goff was pretty good. It was just those 5 picks that were just really holding him back. My only complaint about this Lions performance outside of the abysmal first half is I feel like they should run the ball a little bit more, especially when Jared Goff is having these down games. I'm nitpicking here. That was just an awesome performance from Detroit, especially in the second half. For Houston, this is an incredibly bad missed opportunity. You were up massive at halftime and you put up a stinker in the second half. Joe Mixon had himself a really rough day, 25 carries for 46 yards and 1 touchdown. Early on, the passing game was really solid for CJ Stroud. I mean, he was hitting his back foot and just dicing the defense the entire first half. They couldn't score touchdowns on every possession, but they were scoring points consistently, and it felt like they were going to find a way to rout the Detroit Lions and come out victorious with a very impressive win against maybe the best team in the NFL. But that second half was ugly. CJ Stroud came out there, first play, throws a pick, and then later in the fourth quarter also threw another interception. Both those plays, by the way, were massive for Detroit because they were potentially in a situation where if Houston goes out there on that first drive and puts up points, it could definitely hurt the Lions' chance of coming back. And that second turnover was one that I believe was on a shot to the end zone. And if you score on that one, I mean, this game is probably a no contest at that point. Houston's probably running away with the victory. Give credit to Detroit for making those plays, but for CJ Stroud, that's just tough, man. You cannot make those plays. The offensive line continues to be a big issue for Houston. Not having Nico Collins nor Stephon Diggs is another massive issue. And when you're solely relying on Tank Dell and Joe Mixon, it's really hard to get this offense going. For the defense, they had a really good first half, but it felt like they were outmanned in the second half, especially with those turnover issues. It's just a really bad loss for this team. I think this team is maybe outside of my top 10 teams right now in the NFL, and I am feeling very pessimistic about what this team can do at least this year. But that's going to conclude the video. Real quick, these were all my picks that I had in my predictions video. As you can see, I had a really good week predicting, so hopefully I can keep it up. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. I love you guys. Peace.